welcome to the inaugural School and Society Forum sponsored by the John Dewey Society for the Study of Education and Culture and the BC Teachers Federation. The Dewey Society seeks to promote the work and values of John Dewey, in particular critical and reflective discussions of education, philosophy, and democracy. The BCTF is a social justice union of professionals that is committed to the social development of our communities in areas as diverse as equity, security, and sustainability. And specifically with respect to poverty, race relations, homophobia, bullying, and other issues affecting the interests of the children of BC. And I should say that the BCTF works for justice around the world and is hosting a number of teachers from Latin America at this conference this week. Today, in the midst of dramatic labor-related events in British Columbian public education, the Dewey Society and the BCTF bring together a panel of teacher leaders and faculty scholars to explore vital issues surrounding the success of our public schools. These issues are organized under the theme, Teachers' Unions Build Trust in Teachers. Each panelist will speak for approximately 7 minutes, after which we will pause for preliminary questions. Before moving to facilitated breakout groups on each topic, we shall conclude with a brief plenary review. Johanna Larsson, immediately to my left, will address professional autonomy. Johanna Larsson has been teaching for 19 years and has been active in the Teachers Federation for much of this time. She taught in the remote fly-in community of Ebamet Lake in Northern Ontario and Aklavik in the Northwest Territories before settling down in Prince Rupert, BC, our northernmost port city. Joanna has a master's degree in curriculum and instruction from Simon Fraser University. Most of her career has been in special education and teaching kindergarten. Recently, Joanna traveled to Colombia with a delegation from the BCTF to attend the first Latin American Pedagogy Congress. Joanna is a member of the BCTF Executive Committee.
In order to discuss professional autonomy, we have to start with a definition. And the best one that I've come across is from the work of Anne Phelan and Alice Pitt. You see Anne's here. And that is thinking for oneself in uncertain and complex situations in which judgment is more important than routine. So more than anything else we do as teachers, our constant striving to prepare our students to use their own judgment in the world is what sets us apart from other professions. Thus, it has different consequences when our professional autonomy is eroded, because you cannot erode a teacher's autonomy without eroding that of their students. We strive to empower our students with the knowledge they need to make good decisions, the confidence they need to make responsible decisions, and the open-mindedness and strength to make difficult and sometimes unpopular decisions. Essentially, we are trying to create a safe place in our schools for students to practice that decision-making and gain confidence through using their own reasoning. As teachers, we have a profound commitment to promoting our students' thoughts and opinions, both as learners and responsible citizens of a fair and just democratic society. Teacher autonomy and learner autonomy are implicitly linked with one another by the nature and the purpose of what we believe public education to serve. If we take the neoliberal view that education is nothing more than a service that can be purchased, or that it is the basic training to create a cheap army of labor, then teacher autonomy becomes an obstacle, something to be eliminated. This is what we are seeing globally with right-wing governments, which are becoming quite prevalent, and we see this in BC right now with the passing of Bill 22, the Education Improvement Act. Bill 22 places strict conditions on teachers' contracts, essentially gutting teacher evaluation language, stripping seniority from post and fill, taking control of teacher professional development, and removing the right to bargain any economic gains, including cost of living, through a net zero mandate, which it's actually made law. It also puts extreme and potentially crippling fines in place for anything that could be considered civil disobedience or illegal job action. In opposition to that, if we take the view that education is a fundamental right and the means to educating citizens to participate in and sustain a democratic society and create a better world, teacher autonomy becomes necessary to educate each citizen with equal quality and care. And this speaks to access. The idea that all children should have access to a quality education, regardless of their economic status, location, gender, race, just to name a few of the things that become obstacles in free market societies and educations. Yesterday, I had the opportunity to attend a panel discussion put on by IDEA. That's the event that Paul mentioned is happening at the BCTF building. It's the Initiative for Democratic Education in the Americas. And a number of the speakers on the panel discussed the impacts of the neoliberal agenda on the teaching profession in their countries, which, other than the context of violence that many of them face, such as Honduras and Colombia, what they are facing is eerily similar to what we are facing here in British Columbia and other jurisdictions in Canada. One of the glaring similarities are the policy attacks on the teaching profession, which seek to destabilize teachers. Things like eliminating seniority and due process. They need uncertainty to control teachers, and that is the agenda of the right-wing governments. They believe in an ideology that supports cultural hegemony and education as a service, something to be commodified and profited from. These governments use policy to create fear, and fear is the greatest threat to professional autonomy. Without seniority and due process and economic stability, teachers become fearful. And the cumulative effects of increased fear and the erosion of our autonomy means that teachers become less willing to be creative, inventive, and push the envelope in methods that will engage students. We become obedient and compliant, and we're more likely to follow bad advice from superiors in order to please them than to challenge bad ideas. This is when the policy changes in the form of curriculum and the 21st learning agenda become so dangerous. The vision of personalized learning that predominantly exists in the 21st century learning model diminishes the art of teaching and reduces the role of teachers to facilitators. It imposes the dominant or sole method of instruction through technology and essentially removes teachers from classroom, potentially creating a dehumanized mode of instruction. It also means an indoctrinating of our children to exist in an urban consumerist society and possibly no other. It disconnects us from our environment and narrows our potential to the use of corporate tools. Technology can also be a means of surveillance, which is further used to create fear through constant monitoring and control. We shouldn't forget that historically, public education evolved as a means of educating a class of people to serve the elite members of society. In his essay on liberty, John Stuart Mill said, "A general state education is a mere contrivance for molding people to be exactly like one another, and as the mold in which it casts them is that which pleases the predominant power in the government, it establishes a despotism over the mind, leading by natural tendency to one over the body." This is not a place that we want to return to in education. Teachers see their work as encouraging our students to become persons of character, strength, and integrity, to imagine alternate visions of society with greater equality and less hardship, freedom of conscience, and responsibility to the collective. And for this to happen, teachers need to have the autonomy to do those same things.
Kip Wood, the gentleman on our panel, will address advocacy for educators and education. Since 1990, Kip Wood has been a teacher at 2 different inner-city high schools in Nanaimo on Vancouver Island. He has a master's degree in mathematics education and presents regularly at provincial and Northwest conferences. Kip started coaching basketball while he was an undergraduate at the University of Victoria and continued coaching until other leadership duties have called him away. From his first year as a teacher, Mr. Wood has been involved in the BCTF, taking part in conferences and meetings and on committees. In 2007, Kip was elected as president of the Nanaimo District's Teachers Association. In 2010, he was elected as a member-at-large of the BCTF Executive Committee. Mr. Wood has written dozens of letters to the editor on a variety of education issues, as well as numerous articles that have been published in Teacher Magazine, a publication of the BCTF, which I should say is a good read and available to you at bctf.ca. Kip is a member of the BCTF Executive Committee.
Advocating for teachers involves knowing about what stands in the way. Opposing forces are successful when they are able to divide us. For example, our provincial government refers to teachers and the BCTF as separate entities. Their policy changes and legislation are designed to separate members from their union leadership. With this knowledge, our strategy then becomes one of strengthening solidarity. It's easy to say, but I believe it's our greatest challenge. It's not that we don't have common experiences and beliefs about public education, rather it's the articulation of those experiences and beliefs that strengthens us. In his 1916 book, entitled Democracy in Education, John Dewey stated, "Communication is a process of sharing experience until it becomes a common possession." Dewey's belief was that this process requires constant renewal and sustains us socially, like food sustains us physiologically. Dewey's writing helps us develop a philosophy of education that's consistent with our worldview. For a teacher activist or a union leader, the process is not unlike that of a teacher. Activism has to be motivated by what we believe, by our educational philosophy. Our challenge becomes the articulation of those widely held beliefs. However, the endpoint should never subsume the process of getting there. Dewey believed that if tangible products prevail over the process of gaining valuable experience, then the benefits become materialistic. We cannot take the easy way out. The only path to Dewey's common possession is democracy. Today I'd like to emphasize some entry points. How do we start down the path of advocacy for teachers and public education? To counter the divide and conquer strategy that we face, I believe we need to start with our own history. One of the successes of neoliberalism is divorcing people from their own history. Paulo Freire talks about the effect of people being unaware or being separated from their own past. Freire says that neoliberalism is fatalism because it leads to the belief that the future is determined and cannot be influenced. So in order to influence events, I believe we must tell and retell our stories. Public school teachers in BC have been bargaining since March of last year. To prepare for this bargaining round, slides and notes were produced in order to support local activists. Meetings with members were the top priority, and our bargaining history was the main topic. The goal of these meetings was to make a clear connection between past struggles and current conditions. I recall that one of our presentations was called Connecting the Dots. Once bargaining started, it became apparent that future conditions are not guaranteed. When our employer started tabling concessions, along with the net zero mandate, members had to call on their own experience. For members without knowledge of previous struggles, our history lessons helped us to bridge the gap and activate our collective memory. Again, this is not a one-off. As bargaining proceeds and even after bargaining ends, the history lessons have to continue. The historical development of collective bargaining as an institution, like any history, has punctuation marks. It's not a linear progression. It's not a coherent sentence. I like to think of it as hopscotch. And like hopscotch, the rules are very unclear. It's my memory. Sometimes it's 2 steps forward, sometimes it's 1 step back, sometimes it's 3 steps back. With this comparison, you appreciate that the rules themselves are ever changing, and the employer will do things that they cannot do. I used to work alongside a colleague who would say that. They can't do that. He was always correct in his assertion because he knew the rules. As a result, he knew when there was a violation of those rules. If the rules are twisted, reinterpreted, or ignored, what's left for us to do is devise a plan. The public faces a barrage of relentless messages that create a narrative. Our plan has to be equally relentless and has to include a counter-narrative that is steeped in our most strongly held beliefs. Convincing members that they can overcome the challenges involves reminding them that we have done it before. Whether the rules are fair or not, we have always stopped them from doing things that we oppose. History is a reminder that they will do what we can't prevent them from doing. Our actions have influenced the course of history, and that recognition is a reminder that our actions are critical in shaping the future. In sum, advocacy to me involves activating our collective memory by revisiting our own history, engaging in democratic processes in order to identify and articulate our common beliefs, and establishing a counter-narrative that supports those beliefs.
Marjorie Dumont, to my extreme left, will reflect on parent and community support. Marjorie Dumont is our panelist's English name, and her traditional name is Katan. Ms. Dumont belongs to the Tisayu Beaver clan of the Wet'suwet'en Nation. Her roots are also with the Gitskan Nation. She has an Aboriginal Leadership Certificate from the Justice Institute. Marjorie is currently on leave from a teaching position as a learner support teacher in the Surrey School District, in order to work with the British Columbia Teachers Federation as the Assistant Director of the Professional and Social Issues Division, Aboriginal Education Program.
Denise, Jakaze, Skyze, Hadi, Jean Tapi Handu. My traditional name is Gadan. My English name is Marjorie Dumont. My father's name is Wadahget, and my mother's name is Willat. Their English names are Henry and Sue Alfred. My house chief's name is Chief Nemax, and his English name is John Ridsdale. And I belong to the Tayu clan, which is the Beaver clan of the Wet'suwet'en Nation in the northern part of British Columbia. My roots are also with the Gitxsan. What I did was I addressed all of you, the male chiefs, the female chiefs, and the ones that are coming up to become chiefs. And that is one of the most important protocols that I've done for you to start my speech, because in most Aboriginal communities, if not all of them in BC and across Canada, one of the most important protocols is to acknowledge the territory that you're on, and to also let the people know who you are, where your roots are. That's two of the most important protocols in Aboriginal communities. And I'm really grateful, since becoming involved with the British Columbia Teachers Federation, that we've set policy at the AGMs where we acknowledge the territory of the major meetings, conferences, throughout the province and in the Lower Mainland, that you begin with the acknowledgement of the traditional territory. So I'm really honored and pleased to be a part of the Federation who has put policy forward to do this, to bridge the gap between Aboriginal communities and non-Aboriginal communities. The other most important teachings from my parents and my grandparents ever since I could remember is to always let people in the audience know who you are and where you come from. That is so important. And I've always remembered my parents telling me how to say it and what to say. I also said it was a great day today, and I've greeted you with a hello. So those are really important things that you, to I'm not going to focus on the barriers of what's happening with Aboriginal communities with any of the sectors like education, health, justice, the mistrust that Aboriginal people have of systems. I'm not going to focus on that, but I'm going to focus on ways to make and bridge the gap between Aboriginal communities and non-Aboriginal communities, specifically with the education. A lot of our parents, as you know, and grandparents have come from the residential schools, and they're really not very, their spirits are damaged, and they're in the healing process. So we're trying to build that bridge by incorporating policies such as the acknowledgement of the territory. When that began in some of the schools that I taught at, and we acknowledged the territories there, you could immediately see the pride in Aboriginal students who come from that territory. They're sitting really slouched, and then they kind of sit up when you say, and I'd like to thank the people of this territory. And you see them just kind of, their posture really tells me a lot that it means so much, and that it's a very important protocol. So if anything from what I say today is to remember that, and that's how immediately you're going to build a relationship. And I'm also going to let you know that there's two worldviews, and you probably all are familiar with the worldviews of Aboriginal people. The worldview of collectivity, like working together, is it's just a part of our life. And also humor, and when I started with the humor is a big portion of who we are. And the more you get teased, the more we like you. So just don't get offended when people are adding humor to as you build that relationship. The relationship part of the work that we do at the Federation is not too familiar, because a lot of us here, we like to get to work right away. We get to the business, and we conduct our business, what needs to be done. And oftentimes we neglect the relationship part. And so as I grew up, and the teachings that have been instilled in me is that the relationship part is so important. Even though it feels kind of odd to just work on relationship, once you establish that, and it may take time, you might be impatient with that process, but once you get the relationship built, the work comes really quickly. And you probably had experiences with that in other situations too, but that's so important for Aboriginal communities, is that relationship building. And one of the other things that, before I finish, is I'm really pleased also with the Federation for putting forth and carrying out a policy that just in the recent AGM, where we carried out the policy about the BCTF acting in solidarity with Aboriginal people to oppose the construction of Northern Gateway twin pipelines, the proposed industrial development from coal bed methane extraction to coal mining, minerals and mining, and hydropower that threaten the sacred headwaters of the Skeena, Nass, and Stikine, Prosperity Mine, and in the northern part of near Williams Lake. The mining would definitely destroy the Tesdan Bini, the fish lake. Kinder Morgan's plans to twin the Trans Mountain Pipeline, the proposed Keystone Gulf Coast expansion project that would supply Alberta crude oil beginning at Hardisty, Alberta, and extend southeast through Saskatchewan, Montana, South Dakota, and Nebraska. So these are opportunities that we've created that would, that the union would provide trust to Aboriginal communities in uniting, because where there's unity, there is always success. So on that, awitsa, snake halia. I just said, that's all I have to say, and thank you.